Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's the Jade Gemini. This afternoon I'm super excited to bring a review of this guy right here. This is the EK201 owned by KaBar. And today what I'm going to do is go over what I like, what I love, what I dislike, and if it applies, what is rubbish about this knife right here. Before I do that though, I do want to get some things out of the way. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually start on size comparisons. This knife is a big old boy. A lot bigger than stuff I usually have. So here it is next to the beloved and well-renowned Benchmade Bug Out. Get that actually, well, I'll save that, right? And then here it is compared to a standard Victorinox ALOX 93 millimeter. So you get some size, get some ideas of it butt to butt as well. What's really gonna understand how big this is let's open this up. Talk about that. Yeah, this is a big knife for sure. Here it is even next to a Microtech UTX 85. So more of a compact knife, very similar in size kind of to the Bug Out. But as you can see, this knife is much, much longer. We'll get a butt to butt as well. And you're looking at about a 4-inch blade here. And overall, probably about 8.75 to even maybe that 9-inch range. So yeah, big old knife. But with that, let's go and jump right into what I like, love, dislike, and hate about about the EK knife here. So the first thing to like overall is just, to me it is we're going to start off actually with the pocket clip, believe it or not. Do that a lot it seems, but it's a great pocket clip, right? I like a wire clip, but sometimes it can be a little flexy, a little flimsy, a little flexible. This is flexible, but it's been well thought out. It's strong and stiff, and it carries really, really deep in the pocket. It's also small. It's not like halfway down the knife, so I do really like that. It gets out of the way. There's also no real hot spots. Even back here where there are these two posts, you can kind of squeeze into it, and you know, it's not really doing anything. Also with these vertical lines here, this actually sits in those notches so it doesn't move back and forth a lot. It kind of stays put, which is really nice. Next thing is kind of speaking about that is the scales itself here. So it is something that these are really, really nice scales actually. We'll talk about, but there's a lot to love here. First is you get this beautiful contour over the entire knife. So when you look at this, it is contoured all the way, and then it wraps around as well and has this nice contoured edge as well. So everything is soft, everything is well rounded, right? Even is a little fatter here and a little thinner here to kind of match that hand grip. And it has these nice, simple, but, cool, effective, ribbing as well to aid in some traction as well. So something I do like. Another thing to like as well is this knife is particularly feels pretty thin. Probably half of that is due to the contouring, but the other half is probably actually a little thin. So as you can see, it's thinner than our Microtech, which generally is a knife that is kind of small, slim, and trim, and fits into the pocket as this like little box, right? This is kind of very much in that same vogue, right? Like thin, same direction here, a little thinner here, right? As well, and same tallness, maybe even a little of the tallness. Now, of course, another master of thin is your Benchmade Bug Out. And even though these are not aftermarket scales, at the highest point these are aftermarket scales, at the highest point, they do match up the same. And you're not too far off, at the thickest point, with this knife, which is very, very impressive. Also look at it with the tail as well. So you get a nice contoured thin knife that hides away in the pocket that's pretty big. I think those are pretty desirable features. The other cool thing that I do like as well is just, well, a lot of little touches that have went into this that are pretty nice. For example, you have this nice rounded off area where the blade hides in and completely falls into place. Very much like a Quaken design, like a Burnley or something like that, right? So definitely cool overall. So a lot of different things to like with this knife overall. The other thing I do like that it is a liner lock. I do like my titanium frame locks, but what this means is with this being a flipper, you can't press up on that liner and, accidentally make it where it won't deploy. Easy there. I also like that it does have a slightly proud liner. Doesn't get in the way, but it aids in a little bit of traction there. And it does make it easy to disengage the lock itself and allows it to drop free. Also, a big plus is that this is a nested liner that the scale hugs around, hides the liners on the inside instead of just being able to see those liners on the back. Makes it feel a lot more modern and quality. So, a lot of things to like. Now, kind of throttle plating myself here because there's so much to love about this knife. First thing is a quick story. This is kind of a dream knife of me that I didn't know would ever get made. And the reason behind that is that an actual now good friend of mine, Matt Martin, who is the custom knife maker from Vehement Knives, as well as Jim Stewart, who is the son of the owner of Bark River Knives, Mike Stewart, did a podcast a couple of years ago that is one of the best podcasts for knives out there, called Behind the Blade. And if you love history and you also love knives, right, and you also love, some guys kind of joshing around and kidding, drinking some beers, right, it's a great, amazing podcast that I absolutely love. But in one episode, he talked about this EK knife, not EK, but EK knife that was actually made for the GIs back in the day that needed a better knife than these sort of, put together, beloved but not so rough and tough Navy MKIIs, right? That were being given out to the soldiers back in the day, the KaBars, right? Funnily enough. So anyways, long story short, he talked about how great this knife was, how it was used. It was the Commando's knife company, right? And just had this sort of second cool everything he talked about it. And he talked about those iconic screws that were able to be, tightened by soldiers in the field with the scales. And so essentially, I loved everything about this, but I don't really carry fixed blades too much. And if it was a small, 3-inch fixed blade, okay. But most of their knives are 5 inches, 6 inches, 4.5, because they're Commando knives. They're meant to be long to be able to get at, tactical stuff, right? So the fact that they finally made a flipper or a folding version of an EK knife, I'm like, this is probably not going to be the best, but I'm going to buy it just so I can say that I have it. All of that to say that it really is just vehemently better than I thought, nod to Matt, right? Than I thought it would be, right? That's the next thing to love. This knife is made in Taiwan, right? Which some people could see, hey, it's not, China, if you have a problem against that. Me personally, I don't. I don't think that geography dictates if you make a knife well or not. But when it comes to Taiwan, Taiwan's kind of like Boker, right? You can have a Boker Plus that is made in the cheapest factory in China. You can then have a Boker Plus, which is made in Taiwan. You can then have a Boker Plus, which is made in a great factory in China. Then you can have a Boker Plus, which is made in Germany, and so on and so forth, right? So what I'm trying to get at here is Taiwan's very much of a hit or miss. You're either going to get cold steel Taiwan, which is pretty dang nice with good heat treats and everything like that, or you're going to get SOG bargain dollar bin Taiwan, you know, the knives that are sold at Lowe's that you can't eliminate blade play at all, and you know, you hit once and the lock bar disengages, right? So I digress. Essentially, I had the thought and fear, and none of that came into play. This knife is amazingly built. Is just something that I absolutely love. All the little bits and bobs are way better than I thought. You get a consistent edge, which actually beats out some American-made stuff, right? Some Benchmades have had with inconsistent higher bevels on one side than the other. You don't have a problem where the tip all of a sudden it like rounds up at the end. It has like a little mini tanto or like is burnt down, right? It is a super pokey tip that goes straight, follows the edge here of the design itself. Looks amazing, right? You also have a pretty straight edge here. There's a tiny smile, right? But I can get through that. It doesn't break up the design too much. That'll probably sharpen away with just a couple, you know, different sharpenings, right? Also, guys, that's without oil and that's with no blade play. What is going on? Like, the best, this could be the best flipping action I've ever felt. I've never been into flippers really, because there's always been something to be desired. I want that insane, hard-firing, rocket ship, shakes my hand like a ProTech automatic, but a flipper with a perfect detent. This has that action. What is that? That's ridiculous. But you also get no blade play at all. Solid lockup. Lockup is right in the middle, right? Really shouldn't wear too much anyways, but it's right in the middle, so you know you're getting the confidence of a lock, but you do have some life in it if it was to settle and move a little bit less. I've found that even if you flip a knife, you know, 5,000 times, it might settle a little bit, but then it just settles into place personally. The other thing to love here is that this could have been done so wrong, right? For so many different reasons. You could have had major script on the front. It's an EK Commando knife by KaBar and all this just different stuff. It just says EK with a tasteful, beautiful signature, right? This could have been done wrong where edges were sharp. It's got contoured and chamfered edges. It's well engineered. I've taken this thing apart. It has a D-shaped pivot, right, on one side. It has these middle parts that you could just take apart the back and the front and come apart like a frame lock, right? Instead of having 4 separate pieces, it has an internal stop pin that the blade rotates around. Like, it has a beautiful rounded spine that you can easily work with all day, right? It's in S35VN. They could have made this and made it in AUS 10A. Right, and it just ruined it. They made it in S35VN, which is, even though it's M390 in my name, probably this is the steel I have the most experience with, and I probably like the most, at least because of that experience, right? And again, that just action is just ridiculous. And back to the engineering, you have a part where they flattened out inside of the bearing, a bearing area that actually sits down into, right? So it is stabilized. Again, you got that internal internal stop pin that flows through the blade. You have great lockup. You have these chamfered edges. This is a very perfect geometry of the flipper where it is. Kind of looks like a little bird, right? But you can easily light switch, which I don't like. That usually hurts my finger joint for whatever reason. Or you can push button, and both ways works great. Oh my God, and fires with authority, 100% reliable. Get this proud standoff that kind of matches the same rounded shape here. Backspacer, my bad. And even though this is FRN, which we'll get to, they did this right? It's not just a screw. There's a screw that goes in, and then from the standoff, there's holes that then is this bi-directional clip that you can have on either side, sets into. Then there are bars that stabilize here, as well as cast into the actual FRN itself, more barbs that actually stabilize here. So this is solid than more more solid than some G10 knives that I've had before. Full liners. It's also not the heaviest as well, which is kind of surprising. I think this is right at about 3 to 3.25 ounces, which this is a 4-inch blade, guys. So the ratios are right as well, and especially how thin, light, and trim it is. Also, it comes pretty nicely sharp from the factory as well, which is always a plus, right? It's a little thicker behind the edge, but this is made to be also kind of like a tactical knife. But because it's so slim and trim and everything, it's had no problem integrating itself into just everyday task. Just so much to love that they could have gotten wrong, and they actually paid respect to Ek Knives, right? And the owner and its amazing history, like Matt and Jim talk about. And here you are with this outstanding knife that I absolutely love. But like anything, that perfect action, the amazing scales that are rounded, that are grippy, contoured, you know, the handguard that comes down from the flipper, the well engineering, right? The S35BN, right? There is things to still like about every single thing, or dislike about every single thing. And so that's what we'll go into next. So the first thing, again, it's the aesthetic for me. But some people could dislike that this doesn't use Torx, right? I just use the head of a Swiss Army knife taped up, and I don't have to worry about it marring, right? You could maybe even use a coin in the field, but really I don't think, you know, you should have to be doing that, or just a flat head. But some people could not like that. So that's just a sort of, you know, for every man, I'm just going to kind of say what maybe some people are thinking. The other thing that I do dislike here is probably the most obvious, right? The scales. Oh, man, FRN. Oh, Gryvery. Right? Look, the thing is that, the thing to love the most is that this knife is like on the streets $110, $105. I got this for $105 for this good of a knife that beats out actions and lockup and everything of like $270 weaves and stuff in some way. Like, and the other thing that I do love is because it kind of pays homage to that older style of like generation of knife makers and stuff. This kind of feels, it just has this feeling of kind of like Emerson, but without any of the Emerson problems of like lack of quality and stuff. But it just sort of feels a little bit more simple in its tech, but like everything's under the skin. But like the way it looks, this beautiful design as well. That's the biggest thing of all, is to like its design, that Ek aesthetic. I'm sorry I didn't, touch on that. You get this beautiful swedge, just this sort of weird standoffy blade. Yeah. But anyways, back to what I was saying. The FRN here is going to be the most obvious thing. So, of course, I would have loved G10 that had these type scales. Or, oh my gosh, can you imagine carbon fiber in this? That's what I would love one day for a special edition. I'll spend the money for it. But the thing is that you have to understand, to get this amount of work, right? This amount of contoured, where it's thicker up here, half, a third through the knife and then thins out, to have these milling lines, to have every single edge perfectly rounded and chamfered, and everything like that. This would have just, even if this is made in Taiwan, this would have raised this knife's price substantially, right? It could be maybe $60, $70 more. Instead, you'd probably have it still costs more, but you'd probably have, for like a $40 upcharge, flat slab side scales with just chamfered edges, not even, contoured, and that's what the knife would be. So to me, like, the feeling of it feels nice, right? It looks nice. It doesn't feel like the most plasticky, it feels like a tool, but it doesn't feel like awful, right? It feels like advanced, polymer, like something that's like more advanced, like you would think of in like a firearm or something like that. So to me personally, It feels better than some polymers that I've felt from, even American companies out there, right? So I don't mind it, but we will say we all would love to see a more premium version of this, but this would bring up said price. The other thing that doesn't bother me but could bother some is that this knife is not 100% centered. It is off to the side. Hey, look, nothing is rubbing, to me. But, that could bother some, that this doesn't come perfectly centered. And hey, maybe yours will, right? But the way that this is constructed so tightly with all the pins and everything, there really isn't like a walking technique like you can use on like a Spyderco or something. This is basically what you get is what you get, right? Let's see here. What else? The only other thing I'd say is that it might just be an optical illusion, but I believe that on this one, when they bent this lockup, it made this bend out and kind of press this inside out more, and actually made it kind of bow and be a straight scale on this one, but like a bowed scale and liner on this side. So I took it apart, which was easy enough to do, and I kind of did a bendy thing where it sort of, bows out. So then once everything's mounted, it's a lot more straight. It's not really that flexible either. I know there's kind of fears of that because it is a steel liner underneath, right? But just something to maybe observe, and that could just be my eye playing tricks on me, but I decided to do that personally, and now I'm, happy with it. But yeah, those are probably the things that I would say to dislike about this knife. And there's nothing rubbish at all. So, in total, if you saw this knife and said, wow, that's really cool, I'd like a piece of history, Ek knives, that's cool, I know what that is, right? The World War II, Commandos, using this, the history that it's been used even till this day, throughout groups. But I'm just not sure, it's not American made, right? It's owned by, KaBar, which I don't think is necessarily a negative thing, right? But it's not made in their factory, right? Fear no more, right? It is as good as you could maybe have dreamed of it. It really is that. Even the Grivery feels great to me. And again, I've had Microtechs, Crifts, Reeves, Henders, everything in between, right? I think that this pays amazing dividends to the legacy and the history of Ek knives, and does it in a way that is not only tasteful and true to the design, they're not just using a name and slandering it or to make money or anything, but also they did it in a modern way, which is going to make this a competitive knife compared to other things. Have a competitive action that makes you look at other knives like, God dang. And just, yeah, it's everything I could have hoped for and more, to be honest. So, that is this big ol' Ek, EK, or EK201. Tactical folding, Quaken, heritage knife. I don't know. So, hope you guys enjoyed this review as much as I have been just so looking forward to making it. If you did like it, please go ahead and give a like as well as subscribe, and leave any sort of comments down below that you might have any questions about. As well, please check out my good friend Matt Martin's and Jim Stewart's podcast Behind the Blade. Giving them a shout out. They haven't made episodes in a couple years, which is a shame, but also check out Vehement knives. Probably the coolest looking knives on the entire planet. If you like not ridiculous knives that are like super duper big and gaudy, but you like that sort of 80s Commando. Arnold has the headband on, you have, I forgot his name. He's the guy, I think, from Sweden that played against Rocky. Also, if you like Sylvester Stallone, if you like that sort of 80s Commando, super cool, bad ASS sort of thing, but you don't want the knife to be unpractical and gaudy, check out his stuff. It is just dyed in the wool, sick like that. And of course, everybody should know about Bark River knives, but they're not giving me any shout out. They don't know that I'm telling you about this, but check all of that stuff out. Of course, I can't thank you enough for taking time to watch my little channel, as there's so many amazing content creators out there that you could be watching. You decided to listen to me ramble on about this knife I'm passionate about and that I love. What a world we live in, right? Of course, I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. You guys take care. Stay safe. Peace.